Hello again, everybody. I forgot to hit the record button, so just all that you missed is a brief introduction about me and what I'm doing at ENGin, managing a pronunciation program and a mini group. And people have gone ahead and introduced themselves in the chat. We have an international group and we have many people from the US as well. So I'd just like to welcome you again. And now we're going to move on to our agenda for today. All right, so first I'd like to talk about why mini groups. And perhaps you have some ideas of your own to share why you think mini groups might be a good idea and what are some of the advantages. I've listed a few in my slide, which are over here. We're not going to go over them in detail, but these are some things that I thought of when I was creating this presentation. So I think it's really an opportunity to use our time really efficiently, because as wonderful as it is to have the one-on-one with students, if we have more than one student, it's the same amount of time for us and we get to interact with more than one, and hopefully they can benefit from that. And we also benefit because we are establishing a relationship with more than one student. Would anyone like to add to my list, or do you have any of your own ideas? You could also say it out loud if you'd like to.
Well, sometimes you could get into a rut with a student, and bringing in a new voice and new interest and could just make it more interesting for everybody.
Yes, that's a really good point. And sorry, I won't be responding using your name because on my screen I can't see who's speaking. But you're right. When I took on a second buddy, I actually put the new buddy with my previous buddy. So we were a group of 3. And even though it didn't seem as if we were stale, we'd been meeting for about a year, it was really fun to have somebody new. It was just something different.
Yeah.
Excuse me, this is Steve from St. Louis.
Really only joined this because of my own class. Just to get their ideas.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Marshall. I can wait.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't on mute. I apologize.
Okay. Okay. So I'm used to meeting people online for years. But I've been started learning Russian about 8 years ago. So I've met people all over Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan for about 8 years, and also help them with English. So I have my habits and what I think works. But I decided to join mini group because all my other students have a reasonable level of English. And I'm hoping to meet some people with a little bit lower level of English and younger. But I'm used to, like I say, I'm used to helping people with English. I have my the things I like to do, and just looking for some new students who are maybe a little younger that don't have as high a level of English, so they'll need more help.
Okay, well, that sounds excellent. And of course, you will be able to use those skills and those tools that you already have, and bring that to the table with a new group. So I'm just going to show you now something that I do usually in the first lesson. This was when I was doing in-person lessons, and students would come up with some topics that were quite familiar to them, quite sort of easy in a way. And I like doing this because it gave them a chance to be successful right from the get-go. They were speaking about things that they knew about, and it just was sort of fairly easy, an easy way to start. And they take turns talking about the topics that they chose as a group. Of course, warm-up, there are other kinds of warm-up ideas. There are many, many online. Some of you might be familiar with Hadar. She has a lot of videos about the articulation of the jaw and the lips and the tongue, and she's quite fun. She's a non-native speaker who speaks English really, really well. And yeah, my students really like her. So that's always an option, just to share with them. I'm not going to show you that unless we have time at the end, but you can always click on these links later. There's also a site over here for easy icebreakers. These are actually very easy to find online. You can just run a simple Google search. And then in terms of agreeing on a day and time to meet, that will already have been set up for you with ENGin, because that's how they match you with students, as we know from having buddies. So you won't have to do that. Then you'll probably want to set up a Telegram or WhatsApp group chat. It's just an easy way to communicate with them all at once. And then you're going to choose topics with the students. And we're going to look at some sites where that you can use to find topics and to come up with questions to pose to the students before the meetings. Yes, creating a poll is usually very successful. I find that my students really seem to like polls, and they are very keen to respond to those. So I do use polls quite a lot in the Telegram chat. Okay, so now we're moving on to our conversation resources. Now, there are quite a few on my slide, but please don't feel overwhelmed by that. You only really need to find one or two that you like. I'm just presenting a number of options, and you may have some others. And at the end, I'd like to ask you to share those. Perhaps you've been using some with your buddies that could be easily transferred and used with mini groups. So the first one is over here.
Oh my goodness.
As I said, there's no shortage of stuff on the internet. So here are some topics right away. And you could, the students could look at these and you could look at them, put them in a poll, and students choose their favorite ones. Here's another one. Oh, I think my order got a little messed up. But this is the One Stop English site. And once you click on these, you get more, you can actually see the presentations here of how it's, what it looks like. So they have these really nice readings. They come in they're prepared for different levels. So you can choose the level according to your students. They can take turns reading. There is a lot of opportunity for conversation and vocabulary building. And it's just sort of a nice, simple layout that's easy to share online. I like that one a lot. Of course, the ENGin handbook is wonderful. I really think it's not too difficult to use those materials that Rita has prepared at ENGin, and to just use them or some of them in the conversation group, because we're doing conversation anyway, one-to-one, right? And now we're just doing it with more than one student. So the materials, as I said before, are really transferable, I think, into the mini group session. Obviously, there's some other things to think about, regarding time management and things like that. But in general, in terms of resources, we can easily use those. And I think they are fabulous. Is anyone using the ENGin handbook materials now with their buddies?
Yes.
Great, so that could be an easy way to start. And then if you want something different, there are all these other ones too. Then I found this site for beginners. My group, I don't have a beginner group right now. My students are more advanced, but there are lots of resources online as well for the beginners. Oh, that's not it. I think I'm just going to have to go back to the link. I'm not recognizing my links. Oh, here we go, 75. Here it is. Here we go. Of course, unfortunately, we have to put up the advertisements. Here we go. And then if you click on something here, let's say they want to look at, I don't know, food. It's always a popular topic. And there's a video and questions.
New card? You like it?
Yep, the US Bank Cash Plus Visa Signature Card gets cash back on everything I buy.
Everything?
Everything.
Everything?
Everything, everything.
I'm going to have to close that to get rid of the sound. But anyway, you get the idea. So if you click on those links, then you'll get little phrases and sentences that the students can even listen to, which can be really helpful. They can practice with the recording by reading at the same time or listening and repeating. And so that's a nice site, I think, for beginners. If any of you read the New York Times, there's a nice section called The Ethicist. I've used this with advanced students as well. They can choose a topic, and It gives them good practice in discussing different points of view, discussing ethical dilemmas. How can you disagree with someone politely? You know, what kind of lead-in words to use? And the same is true actually if you choose to do a debate. Those can be really helpful for students, and there are lots of sites as well that can help you with how to set up debates. Are there any questions about these before we move on?
Do you have to have a subscription to New York Times to get the ethicist?
That's a good question. If you do, they probably will allow you a certain number. Does anyone know the answer to this? Because the New York Times allows you to see a certain number, I think. But if that is a problem, then I'll take this out of the resources, because I don't like to recommend anything that's not free.
I don't know if how ethical this is, speaking of ethics, but there's something called Paywall Reader, that paywallreader.com. And if you go to that website, you could put any link in there and be able to read articles.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
It's
That is
called
also-
it's called paywallreader.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
could you write that to make sure everybody knows how to spell it and everything?
Yes, thank you. In the chat, it would be great to have that in the chat. So
Yeah,
maybe-
and I know there are a lot. I've used a lot of New York Times things like photo puzzles and stuff like that, and you do have access to it even as a non-subscriber, I believe.
Okay, that's
I
good.
I do have a subscription, but I believe that even without it, you do have some access.
Yes, and the thing is, because you're not reading it every day, so they might allow a certain number of limited articles, and perhaps you'd only do this, you know, once in a while, once a month, who knows? But if you can access it, I think they're wonderful stories, and you know, true current stories. That's always nice to have. And then, of course, the TED Talks. I'm not going to open that site, but I'm sure most of you, or if not all of you, are familiar with TED Talks. Those are great. You could ask the students to listen to something beforehand, or you could do it during the session. But they provide also a lot of, you know, really interesting material, and you can get transcriptions as well for that.
I have a question. You have shown a couple of times a long list of questions. So that, I mean, I could, it was only on for a second or two, so I couldn't tell you, but I wonder what the source for those questions is.
You mean the first one when I did the conversation topics? This one?
Yes, that one. Yes. What is the source for that?
Okay, let me just get rid of that.
Because that looks very valuable to me.
Let's just go back to the original one.
Oh my.
Here we go. Teachers of second languages, lessons. Oh, no, questions. Here's the original site, and then I went to not lessons, I went to questions.
I'm sorry, what was the original site?
I'm going to put it on the screen. Actually, let me put it in the chat.
Oh, that would be excellent. Thank you so much.
Maybe, and actually I might change the link in that so that we do first go to the main site, and then from the main site, I went to questions. There are lessons, techniques, there are all kinds of links that you probably can see. I went to questions. That's how I got to that. And then once you click on the questions, let's say getting to know each other, that's where the
So
questions.
funny, huh?
Getting to know each other.
So first the topics and then questions. Yeah, this is huge. I mean, I think there's probably enough just right here. There's so many.
Absolutely. So to get to, what was the very first, when I go to, you know, the Google site, what do I put in?
You put in this. Did I put it in the chat? I thought I did.
I haven't checked the chat yet.
Oh.
It's the Internet TESL Journal.
Yes. Let me put it in.
Internet
Maybe I didn't paste it in the chat.
TESL Journal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for asking me to clarify that. So yeah, here you go. It can even be a bit overwhelming looking at some of these sites because there's so much, but that's where it's good to just ask the students and they'll narrow it down. You know, you don't have to show them that whole site, but you could show them, you know, a few topics.
Or I could pick a few topics.
You could pick a few topics. So the format that I use with my current mini group is a little different because these are all students that have been through my pronunciation program. And then they said, oh, you know, we'd like to continue practicing. So it sort of evolved into a mini group just by their own initiative. So I said, you know, I'm happy to support them and I'm happy to be there when you do it. But they are actually the ones setting up the topics themselves. And so that just makes it really easy for me. And it also gives them an opportunity to assume more of a leadership role. I'm not suggesting that you do that, but it's just something to know that actually they are very forthcoming. They have lots of amazing ideas. So, you know, you might want to involve them. So we've been doing it for 4 months, and these are the topics that were chosen. So the student who's hosting is the volunteer host for the month, puts the topics in the chat, and then the students, she or he creates a poll, and the students answer the poll. So for example, these are the ones we've done, but we're meeting next week, and the volunteer host has put some topics in the chat. And I thought you might like to hear these because they're a little unusual. The first one is the future of tourism, virtual and space travel. 18 plus, to drink or not to drink, how do you deal with stress? The third one is unexpected discoveries of other cultures. The fourth one is I love to eat. And the last one is education in different countries. So a broad array of topics, and the students are voting. So far, 13 of them have voted. And depending on which one gets the most votes, she will then post some questions in the chat that relate to that one topic. And so it starts to look, that's just another slide about it's just an elaboration of this. The reason these are empty is because I'm going to fill them in each month as the program develops. And then these are some of the questions that the students came up with. The one student host. Actually, they tend to come up with many. I tell them they only need about half a dozen, but they seem to really like this. They'll often put 12 or 15 questions in there. They just like, I think, reading them, thinking about them. Obviously, we never can discuss that many in one session. And so for movies and series, I actually selected just some of them and put them in this slide for you to see. So are there any questions about choosing topics and finding questions before I move on?
Someone has asked if you'll be sending out a link to download this slide set.
Rita, are you still with us?
Yes, of course. Yeah, we are okay sharing. We will be sending these slides and a couple of videos with more tips to you after the training. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Because that is helpful, because I find with webinars like this, if we just get the recording, it's nice, but we don't have the links that are live. And I'll double check all the links to make sure they're shareable. And if you have any problems, please contact ENGin and I'll make sure everything's accessible.
Yeah, one of the disadvantages with Zoom is as soon as you close Zoom, you lose the chats, I believe. So anything that's written in the chat will disappear after the meeting is over.
Yes, that's true for the recording, but not in my Google Slides. So there'll be two different things. And so when ENGin sends the link to this slide presentation, the links will stay live. And so that's an easy way to go back and check them and look at them in more detail. But in the recording,
thank you.
They won't work in the recording. That is true. Yeah, thanks for these questions.
It is possible to save the chat though and pass that on as well.
It is possible. I don't know, Rita, if you'd want to do that. It is possible. If you could, Rita, maybe it's best for you to answer that.
I'm not sure. Can you because like I had an internet interruption issue. Could you please repeat the question?
Oh, the question is, would you be able to share the chat as well as the recording and the Google slide presentation?
Oh, yeah, I will download the slide. I will be able to share it, no problem.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to some more resources. Some of you might be familiar with these. Does anyone use Youglish?
Yes.
So this is very popular with students. If you haven't seen it before, I encourage you to have a look. And I think I'll just open this site because it is really quite fantastic, I think. You know, and our students come with different goals about accent and pronunciation. And I really like this site because they can hear a word pronounced in English in different ways with different accents. So it's very inclusive. Sometimes you might have come across this where they say, you know, I'd like to work on sounding a bit more American versus other kinds of English. And that's fine. In that case, they could just click on the US. But if they're interested in more global kind of English and being understood by a global community of English speakers, especially considering that there are so many more non-native speakers of English than there are native speakers, they might like to just click on all. And let's take a word like research, because research is often pronounced research or research. And then we can just hear how different people say it.
Research by Catalyst and others has shown
Are you able to hear my sound?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
conclusively that the more gender equal companies are,
translate that research into new therapeutics.
And what I found in my research is that I wasn't the abnormal.
So there we already had an example of those two different ways of pronouncing that word. So students know, you know, they can choose. Perhaps they've had a British teacher and maybe they're more likely to say research, or they might have had an American instructor, or they just heard research. And from this, they'll know that both are very acceptable. They're both very easy to understand, and they can just choose one.
So the controls at the bottom allow you to repeat what you just heard, to pause or play, or to go forward to the next instance.
Yes, that's right. So I could go back over here.
Translate that research into new therapeutics.
I can pause it here, or I can go ahead. So once I've heard it, I usually go to the next one, or they might want to hear it several times, right? So they can really hear it clearly rather than just going through so many versions. But this right hand, this one on the far right, this link moves it forward to the next example.
And what I found in my research is that.
And I like, you know, what's really wonderful about this is that it's authentic material. And so they can hear it in a very natural, very real way. Does anyone else want to add anything else to Youglish before I move on? Do you think this could be a site that could be useful to you if you're not using it?
Yes.
Because I'm always looking for ways to help the students be more independent. And there are different ways that they can find out how a word is pronounced. And this is one of them. Here's another site that you may or may not have come across, which is really very sophisticated. It's still free. I don't know if it'll be free forever, but it's where the students, I'll just put it on the screen. Students can put their own text into this site. And that's what I did. So it started off blank. Actually, if I show you, maybe I can go back and show you how it starts off. It's naturalreaders.com, and I'm going to put this in the chat too. Should we do that first? This is really an amazing site too. Okay. And then they can practice with an AI tutor. So when they don't have you there to help them or somebody else, they can just go here. All right, let me just start at the beginning. Started. I actually logged in. I hope I haven't lost my login now. That's probably why I set it up earlier, so that I wouldn't have to go through all this. It is a free site. Maybe it's over here. I think I've lost where I put it in yesterday. You know, what you've probably noticed with these sites is that they're always changing things around. And then you go back and suddenly you don't remember how you did something. But let's see if
I just posted a URL for a similar site that does text to speech. It's very accurate compared to most of these engines.
Oh, that's great. I've just somehow lost my way to get in. Oh, here we go. All right, I was going to say, there goes my presentation demo. Anyway, so this is I copied and pasted it into here. So you just have to remove the words that are there. You put in, the student puts in their own text, and then you can choose someone to read with you or using AI. So for instance, it goes like this.
Amlou is a Moroccan spread made with just 3 ingredients.
Okay, so notice he's reading fairly fast, I think. You can adjust the speed over here and make it a little slower or make it faster. That's a really nice feature, I think. And let's say the student doesn't really care for this person's accent or voice, or maybe someone would prefer a female. You just go over here, change it, and maybe you're going to try, oh, I'd like to try Sonia. Let's go to Sonia and try with Sonia. It's just reloading.
Amlou is a Moroccan spread made with just 3 ingredients.
Okay, so you get the idea. And they also have different accents over here. You can choose different kinds of English. So over time, it's getting more and more sophisticated. I noticed this site. So how do you think you might be able to use a site like this with your students? Does anyone have anything to share?
Well, students can use it on an offline basis. So that, not necessarily in class.
That's right. So you could, if you wanted to practice something as a group, you could put this up on the screen, but ideally they could use this by themselves. That's the beauty of this. So for instance, I'm going to demo this site with my students in the pronunciation group next Tuesday. And, if they have something they want to prepare, like for instance, they might be planning to go for an interview and they might have some things they want to prepare, or they want an introduction about themselves. They could practice in this by themselves, and then they could send me a recording and get some feedback from me. That's typically how I use something like this. But it could also be used, they could use it by doing duet reading with the tutor at the same time. Or they could also do shadow reading. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, where they listen to a little bit, stop and repeat like this.
Amlou is a Moroccan spread made with...
And they can do as much or as little as they want, but then they repeat. Amlou is a Moroccan spread made with...
Amlou is a Moroccan spread made with just 3 ingredients. Almond.
So they can listen and repeat, listen and repeat. So it has a lot of real benefits. And even this listen and repeating or duet reading at the same time as the AI tutor is very powerful. And they notice a huge improvement really fast. So it boosts their confidence within a few minutes. And they can really start to hear the difference between, let's say if they read it first without a tutor even and just see how they do, then practice with a tutor and read it again. It's very powerful. And it's one of the most popular sort of strategies that I do with my students. And it's also really quick. Is this different in any way to the one that you use, the gentleman who said you use a similar site?
It's very similar. It's just very impressive how human sounding the site that I use is.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is amazing. So technology is advancing so quickly, and it's wonderful that we have these things so that we can recommend them to our students.
And if you just need a single word, you can go to Britannica.com, look up the word and just hit the button. You just hear the single word rather than hearing it in context.
Exactly. So I have that down here, number 4. So lots of dictionaries do that. The students typically have their favorites. A lot of them like Longman, that has British and American pronunciation. It just depends what they're interested in. So having access to an online dictionary is great too. I've shown you the natural reader. And then this is an app that I wanted to mention. The students in my pronunciation group also have access. They have premium access actually to this Blue Canoe app. And it is associated, well, it's very much integrated with the system of color vowels, which is, you can probably see behind me, that's what I use to teach vowel sounds, the vowel sounds of English. And so my program and this app are completely integrated. And I can show you that for a moment. I can show you actually just the website. It's only free for 7 days, unfortunately, and the free version is also quite basic. It's enough of an introduction for students, but if they want to really get all the bells and whistles, and there are quite a lot of things that this app offers, then they need to pay. It's about a little over $3, I think, last I checked with a student for Ukrainians. It's much more expensive if you're in the US, but the price varies depending on which country you're in. So for Ukrainians, it's around $3. I think it's about $17 a year. And so, you know, for some students, they might be able to afford that. It's over here. You can check out their website and watch the video and get a sense of what this app offers. So basically the students do a lot of, they play games, they do sort of listen and repeat activities, and then they'll get feedback. Oh, you know, I noticed that, you know, your word for road sounded more like rad or something. And here's how you can practice that O and color vowel language, the rosebud sound, and it'll give them extra practice with that vowel sound.
I have a comment to make. I put it, a lot of the trouble people have is with the variation in English vowels. It's very hard for a lot of people. I did post something called the ESLauthority.com and the rest of that. They have a lot of exercises. Some of them are visual and a lot of them are lists where they say words in pairs with similar sounds to get people used to practicing their vowels. I've known that website for years, and I recommend it very highly. That ESLauthority.com.
Thank you. Did you put that? So that's in the chat?
I already did.
Oh, good. Excellent. Thanks very much. Yes, so those are great. And then, of course, ideally, they'd have someone like, you know, one of you, if it's in your session, who can actually listen to them and give them feedback. Because if they're just listening and repeating, they don't necessarily know if they're doing it correctly. So that's in an ideal world, that's what they'd have. They'd have the resource to practice, and then they'd have someone to say, yeah, actually, you know, that's pretty good, or maybe you need to drop your jaw a little further to get the I sound as in fit, so it doesn't sound like feet. Like, let's find that with your jaw movement, this kind of thing. So it's fantastic if you can help them with that as well as the resource. All right, so we're almost done. And of course, there's the IPA. I personally don't use that. I find it very complicated, even though I was trained with that. The students also find it complicated, but some of them are very proficient at this. They might have grown up with it, in which case it's helpful for them. All right, so I think we've still got a little bit of time. Are there any other resources you'd like to share in the chat regarding pronunciation? Otherwise, we'll move on and we're going to have a breakout room activity.
I just wanted to point out when you're talking about IPA, that they use IPA symbols in that website, so it kind of helps you learn the IPAs, especially with the vowels.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that could be really helpful. You know, I think it's good when we show our students many things, sort of like what I'm doing now, you know, and then they'll choose what their favorite things are. They'll choose the things that help them the most. And so that's what I like to do with them, is just show them different things and then let them decide, you know, which they'd like to adopt. So, okay, so it's time for our breakout rooms. And we thought it would be nice for you to have a chance to meet each other. And in terms of a topic, I'd like you to think about some of the things that we've talked about already and share some ideas about some things you might like to try if and when you choose to have a mini group. You know, not in a formal way, but just the things that you heard or you saw, you heard me say or someone else in the group, or you read something in the chat where you thought, oh, you just sort of something gets flagged. It flags your interest and you feel like that's something inspiring to me, or I'd like to try that. Those kinds of things. So if you would like to do that, Rita, how much time do you think we should spend in the breakout rooms?
I think 10 minutes would be great.
Okay. And then, you know, we'll have a little bit of time for sharing when you come back, and also time for any more questions.